Hey, welcome to the Glen and Dennis podcast. If you're thinking about drinking your tap water, think twice. It might be worth getting it tested. And there's some other alternatives that Dennis and I talk about in today's show. One that I never thought of until I listened to Dr. Hazel Parcells. So what are you drinking out of your tap? You might want to get it tested. And if you do want to get it tested, go to mytapscore.com. Hey, welcome to the Glen and Dennis podcast, the best podcast you'll listen to all day. Sponsored by Mission Blueprint. We need people to keep us humble.
That's right. And, just make us feel small in a really big world. It's great. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will scar me forever.
Exactly. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming back to this podcast. I just want to send vibes. We were just talking about good vibes, rather prayers and grace to you. We're so grateful that you listened to us. Today we want to talk about water.
And share often with your friends.
Share us, yes, but I want to talk about water.
Water. Water, do you want to know about water?
Such a funny guy.
No, so we were having this off-camera discussion before we started about Thales, okay? And Thales speculated what?
So Thales is the first great Greek philosopher, right? That's right.
Okay, off camera, we got confirmation.
Yes, we got confirmation from Gideon, my 13-year-old philosopher. Yes, our editor. He was the first great philosopher, and he said everything is water.
And I have to dispute that we are more nothing than we are anything.
What does that mean, more nothing?
We're more nothing than anything. So if you go down to the anatomic level of water, what is water?
H2O.
H2O is slightly polar because the oxygen binds molecularly to the hydrogen off balance. Hence why an MRI machine works the way an MRI machine works. But if you strip away, what is hydrogen made out of? The element itself.
No idea.
It has a nucleus that has a proton and a neutron, and then somewhere around the outside of it, kind of like an eggshell, there is a single proton or a single electron that floats around. Theoretically, just kind of rotates around.
This is general science.
Just as general science. So oxygen.
A long time ago.
So oxygen has a empirical element level, I think, 8, 7, 6. I think it's 6. I don't know my periodic table off the top of my head, but anyhow, because
I never learned it.
Because oxygen is off balance, it needs an electron to bind to become balanced. Well, yeah, because it's H2O. So there's one oxygen, 2 hydrogens. The hydrogen shares an electron with the oxygen, and another hydrogen shares an electron with the oxygen, make it a balanced molecule to exist in time and space. What is it really made out of? We know that a whole bunch of them come together to form water or a raindrop or whatever dew on the grass. But if you strip it back to its smallest components, it's more nothing than anything.
Define nothing for me.
It's nothing. So what exists between the nucleus and the electron?
Nothing.
Space. There's just space. Think of outer space. Think of Earth to Mars. What exists between here and there? Nothing but space. There's nothing there, at least that we know of.
So there's nothing inside that space.
That's right. So think of us. We're more nothing as human beings than we are anything. That's where I say God exists in the nothingness.
So when Jimmy Coker told me I was nothing when I was in 8th grade, what does that mean?
He was really a philosopher, and he knew more than he realized.
I don't think he was. I don't really think he was.
We'll send this podcast to him directly today.
See, this is General Science 101. He was studying science, and I was studying the girls in the room.
Yeah.
That's why I don't remember this very much. Now, I said this just to kind of nudge my son, Gideon, who's also 13 and will be in General Science probably next year. But I thought water is a very interesting topic.
It is a very fascinating topic.
So we are made up of what percent of water, the human person?
The argument in science is somewhere between 60 and 80%.
Quite a bit, right?
Yep.
So we need to drink water.
That's our hydraulic fluid. That's our radiator fluid.
Yeah. And if we drink water that's not good for us, what happens to the body, doctor?
Well, so you can see like an old storyline like Aaron Brockovich way back in the day where in Hinckley, California or Texas, they were digging wells that were looking for specific petroleum products, and the products they were using to dig for wells were going through the aquifers and they were toxifying the aquifers, making it toxic to people. So the chemicals in the water made people ill because our body's designed to run off of trace minerals and H2O. Anything else beyond that isn't really good for the body. Like drinking a diet soda has aspartame in it, 0 calories, but it has an artificial sweetener in there. Well, artificial sweetener is not designed to be in the human body, and in high enough concentrations will lead to neurological dysfunction and neurological symptoms. Aspartame. You can drink orange juice. Again, orange juice isn't orange juice unless you've squeezed it right from an orange. It is more sugar than it is water. Well, the body doesn't need more calories, it needs hydration. So what the body needs is just water. That's what makes the body run. You would not put Gatorade in your vehicle as a coolant. You would not put diet soda in your lawnmower engine for a coolant. It needs water.
And good water.
Good water. You keep echoing this good water.
Okay,
thing.
so
I appreciate that.
71% of Americans drink tap water. Do you drink your tap water?
No.
Why not?
I don't like the fluoride in it, and frankly, I do not like how it tastes.
Fluoride. Tell me about fluoride.
So, somewhere in the history of dentists and science, it's been determined that the more fluorinated your water is, or when there's fluorine present in the water, it helps your teeth be stronger. Okay. I've never personally read the data on it because I'm not a dentist, but they treat our water. So people, I hope they know this. You go pee and poop in your house, in town.
I use a toilet, but if you want to do it when you're in your house.
Well, you're potty. You're potty.
I try to use a toilet.
Okay. Bidet, if you're like the Willards.
I like the bidet.
We
Keep
got the
going.
bidet. That water goes into the septic system, which then flows to the water treatment plant associated with the municipality, in this case, Brookings, Volga. And that water then gets cleaned.
What does that mean exactly?
So when we flush our toilet, there's paper and there's poo and there's pee and whatever else we've put into our body and whatever things people put down the toilet bowl cleaner, all those things.
Pharmaceuticals that get peed out,
or that just get flushed.
That get flushed out of your body.
Yep. So that all flows to the processing plant. Well, at the processing plant, there's these aerators. They got these little microbes that eat up the poo. There's micron filters, and that water's filtered and filtered and filtered and filtered until the point where they test it and go, yep, that's drinkable again. And then it's pumped back into our water towers, and we drink the water that we drank last week.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
This is how the whole thing works.
That's your municipal water system.
At first, you have to realize what is actually going down in the toilet. What's actually in the urine? What's actually in the feces, right? What's being flushed? Go ahead.
2 years ago, 18 months ago, that's how they were tracking COVID presence in communities where people weren't going to the hospital to be tested. They were testing in the water to see how much COVID virus was in the water.
So I'm curious about this filtration system because who creates the standard? And is the standard a low bar standard or is it a high standard for this country? Because you would think that we are in a first world country, aren't we?
Well, by definition, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
71% of all Americans drink tap water. 69% of all Americans believe the water should be purified.
True.
Why? What's going on? Why are they thinking, this should be purified? Ladies and gentlemen, 7 out of 10 believe that tap water is not good for us.
Right.
So tell me about the standards. I mean, doesn't our opinion count as human persons?
Right, but we're not the governing agency, and those tax dollars need to go to other programs besides just clean water. And if it's good enough, good's good enough.
Okay, I lived in Aberdeen, South Dakota,
Okay.
back in 1990 to 1993. And one thing about Aberdeen is there's lots of great people there. The water is terrible. And I was home a couple weeks ago, not in Aberdeen, where I grew up in Ipswich, and there was an article in the Aberdeen American News about the water. And there was the scandal. This gentleman, I think he was like the superintendent of water. He was saying that the actual tests they were lying to the people about the tests. And they said, no, we're not lying to the people about the tests. But ladies and gentlemen, especially for those who live in Aberdeen, is your water good? And I would say 9 out of 10 would say it's terrible.
Yeah. And
they know it's not good, but yet government agency says, no, these match our standards here and it's fine to drink.
You realize that human beings are the only species on the planet that doesn't verify what they eat through their senses anymore?
Okay, unpack that. What now?
Okay, so human beings are the only species on the planet that do not verify what they eat with their senses anymore.
So taste, smell, what it looks like.
Right, like a deer walks up and smells the clover and goes, oh, that smells good. I'm going to eat that. Oh, that's prickly. That's a thistle. I'm not going to eat that. Raccoons, any wildlife, where do they go for their nutrition, for their food supply? They go to fresh running water. They don't go to a stagnated pond. They don't go to something that hasn't had freshly come from the ground or freshly fallen from the sky. Human beings, we just take what we get because it's what's given to us, I guess, is probably the easiest way to look at that.
Pop-Tarts.
Right. But I mean, think about water. It comes out of my tap. It's the only thing I've got. I'm not going to invest in a system for reverse osmosis. I'm not going to get a Berkey system where I'm going to filter and charcoal filter my own water. Very few people invest money for even the countertop, under the countertop filter systems that you can filter the water before you drink it. We have a filter in our refrigerator. We filter out the water and we change it out every 90, 120 days-ish. And it's just a simple charcoal filter to kind of get rid of some of the adverse tastes. It tastes better than the tap water, but it's still not as good as well water coming from the ground.
Right. So most Americans do not like the taste of their own water. And water is, I mean, we're made up of water.
Yeah, we're supposed
Whether
to be.
it's 60%, 90%, we're water.
That's right.
And going back to the great Thales, he says everything is water, which is very, very interesting for this conversation. The United States water purifier market size was, in 2021, almost $6 billion, and it's projected to be by 2029 $9.1 billion. Mm-hmm. Americans want better water. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very interesting that we're talking about water because I think it's the most basic, essential thing to put in our bodies. I was at a friend's place and she had a Culligan, and I said, "So do you like the Culligan?" "Well, yeah." I said, "Why don't you just drink tap water?" "Well, what's in your tap water?" I said, it's tap water, but what's in your tap water? What are you drinking?" And I'm like, who looks at what you're drinking? Now, this is about 15 years ago.
Comes in the utility bill once a year.
You just drink it. And she said, well, I would find out what you're drinking first because water is the most essential element. And I said, well, let me try your Culligan. And I thought it tasted pretty darn good. So then we got a Culligan, right? Because it made a lot of sense. And we still have it. But then we decided, what if there's an emergency and like the power goes out for 3 days? This isn't like unusual.
Right,
or a
winter
week.
storm or whatever, right?
Yeah. So how are we going to filter our own water? So that's why we bought a Berkey water system, because we thought if there's an emergency, we have something to drink. So anyway, I wanted to talk about this idea of water because I think it's really in the food category. And I think next week I want to talk more about food with you. What goes in the body and how the body...
Inputs equal outputs.
Right. So, and what foods we should be eating as a chiropractor. One of the things I love about the chiropractic...
As a good Christian.
As a good Christian man and woman, but as a chiropractor, you would say, hey, these foods are good for the body and this is why, and these foods aren't. And I think a lot of Americans already know, but I think they need to go to the next step of why is it bad for me? Why is a Pop-Tart bad for you? Well, I think the first question, the first answer would be that Pop-Tart can sit in that package for how many years and it still appears to be fresh? And how do they
Twinkies.
Twinkies, I love a Twinkie, man. Oh, they're the best. But
long after Earth is gone, a Twinkie will still exist.
Velveeta cheese is another one of these that has a shelf life of how many years?
99.
A lot of years. So is this good for us? But water was, for me, a starting point when we start talking about food and health. And it just seemed like, So a lot of Americans don't like their drinking water. So
I wonder if our listeners are people that don't like their drinking water. You should leave a comment below about your drinking water.
And what do you drink? What do you like to drink?
Yeah. And don't be fooled, because bottled water bought from the store is just municipal water bottled.
That's right.
If you look at where it's bottled and manufactured, it is often stated right on the bottle, this is Los Angeles Municipal Water Source. This is Seattle Municipal Water Source. So it's one of those things.
So let's talk about bottled water for a second before we get into our little test here.
Oh, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2.
So I remember I was on Net Ministries back in 1993, and I said to my teammates, you know what they're going to start selling next? Bottled water. No, they're not. Yes, they are. They're just getting us ready for it. And then the next year, I found bottled water in the stores, in the gas stations. And it seems like a great idea. If you need water, you can spend $1 and get a bottle of water. Now it's $2, although if you want a gallon, it seems to be a little cheaper. But so what are the ramifications for drinking bottled water? Are there any? Is there things that we should be concerned about?
So again, you're getting into a whole more complex deal. Like, you talk about good old-fashioned well water. It comes from the ground 200 feet below. It's been filtered by the earth, by the soil, by sand, and it collects in this little pocket. You pump it up out of the ground, out of a steel pipe. It comes out of a copper faucet, turns off, goes in your glass. Boom, done. Ground to mouth. 2 materials, 2 metals. That's it. Now you talk about like a bottled water from... So let's talk about Evian, which ironically is naive backwards.
Very interesting.
One of the first bottled waters that's naive.
I didn't know that.
We're so naive. But anyhow, Evian is, I think, bottled in California somewhere. Or maybe that is the Washington. Either way, it's plastic. It is bottled in a plastic bottle, which has DHA, which has its own chemical profile that it emits, and not chlorofluorocarbons, but it has another dihexyl dihedral type chemical in it, and I can get you the exact stuff in the links below. But the half-life of plastic as it ages emits its own chemicals. So not only are you getting whatever's in that municipal water source, now you're getting toxicity from the plastic itself. Now you can go to Puree water, which is bottled in a glass bottle with a metal cap. There's a thin seal at the top that's made out of plastic, but the surface contact and water contact to the seal is next to nothing as long as the bottle's shipped upright. It's just a sealer. It's not meant to be in contact with water. So that's one of the best sources and contacts or places for bottled water.
Tell me again the name of that company.
Perrier. It's the green bottle.
Sure.
Yeah, it's the French. It's a very...
Does it have bubbles?
Yeah, you can get it bubbled or non-bubbled. You can get it as just straight drinking water, or you can get it as a carbonated. But carbonation adds a whole nother chemical. It's carbon monoxide, I think, and it steals minerals and unstabilizes the chemical balance in your body. So it's not great to drink carbonated drinks anyhow. But anyhow, I'll go down another whole rabbit hole there.
So do you recommend people drink bottled water?
If they do, if that's something you prefer, then drink it from a glass bottle. I don't recommend drinking from plastic. I think 200 years from now, scientists are going to go back and look at people who drank plastic and been like, how stupid were you?
Again, these plastic water bottles, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've been maybe sitting in a shed waiting to be shipped. How
Who
hot
knows what kind of temperatures?
Yeah, I mean, it could be 100 degrees in that shed. Could be 200. I mean, not 200 degrees.
Well, I think yesterday was 92 degrees. If they were driving down the interstate in a truck that wasn't refrigerated, those bottles could easily be 100 degrees from the sun beating on the semi-trailers. Who knows? There's bottles and cases of water that sit in front of Lowe's right at the entrance. Sun beats in those sliding glass doors. Who knows how much sun exposure those bottles have had and how much that temperature of that water has raised. I mean, have you seen what happens to a plastic bottle when you put it in a fire? It just like melts and disintegrates into this weird goo. Like it's turned into something.
Okay, so people are drinking water, but they're drinking water from a tap or they're drinking water from a plastic water bottle. And you would say, this is probably a bad idea.
Well,
what about these Nalgene plastic bottles? Do you know much about the Nalgenes?
I don't. What's a Nalgene?
A Nalgene is a company. They came out, over 20 years ago. They were a thicker plastic. And I don't know if they're healthy or not. If you know anything about Nalgene, let me know. A good friend of mine, Father Brian, drinks from an Nalgene bottle. And he was doing a podcast, and I asked him, is it BPA free? He's like, I don't know. What is BPA? I said, I don't really know what BPA is. What is BPA?
I don't even know. It's some sort of chemical that is emitted from the plastic.
It's emitted from the plastic.
Yep.
And some people think the BPA is in direct correlation to our trans issue. It's making males feel more feminine and females feeling more masculine. And they found it in fish and in 10% of the frogs that have whatever this chemical in, and they eat shrimp. So there's something going on there with the water.
It certainly can be.
Yeah.
And now get into the whole thing about what you had said about pharmaceuticals. Like my good friend, and I'll do a shout out for you, Dr. Jamie Sayer, dear friend of mine, met her in Washington, D.C. when we were just, freshman, sophomore in high school. Beautiful young lady from West Virginia. She now works in California, and she's a brilliant scientist, and her focus is on filtration systems for water. And she's got wonderful articles about there of the work she's done on filtration and trying to make the micron filters shallower and shallower. And we've had off-subject conversations before of one of the biggest challenges for any municipality is how to filter out pharmaceuticals, whether it's fentanyl, if it's estrogen from women's birth control. All of these chemicals need time to dissipate from the water, and if municipalities are rotating that water in too fast, there's a carryover. But she's working on filtration and timelines, and she's a brilliant scientist, Dr. Jamie Sayer.
So I caught on this about 20 years ago. I read a study from England. There were some fishermen, and I don't remember. I'll put the study in there if I can find it in the show notes. But there was a fisherman lifetime fisherman, but he noticed that there were a lot more female fish of this particular fish. I can't remember what it was. And he thought it was bizarre that 90% of them are female. And so they did a study, and guess what was in the water?
Estrogen.
High amounts of estrogen. So who's putting estrogen in the water?
Well, and effectively women are.
That's right.
From using contraceptives.
So 90% of women, if not higher, are on the pill. And you're putting that, ladies, in your body, and your body says, I don't want this in here. So the body tries to get rid of it. And you flush your toilet, and guess what? There's high amounts of estrogen in the water. And guess what happens? We turn on our tap water, and what are we drinking? Do you know what you're drinking in your tap water?
Yeah.
That's what this show is really about.
This is more the question.
Yes. What are you drinking?
What are you drinking?
And what are you drinking? Is it affecting the way that you're feeling, the way that you're acting? Are you gaining weight? Are you losing weight? Are you, what happens to the body when you don't have the right kind of water?
No, it's fuel. If you got the wrong fuel in the system, you're destined to wreck it.
This particular doctor was told at 36 years old that you are going to die of leukemia. This is probably in 1940 or 1930. And so she said, oh, well, I better change my diet because the doctor said, we can't really help you. It's stage 4 and there's nothing we can do.
Right.
So she said,
this is before all the chemicals and all the MRI machines and all the things of modern science that we use now.
So what she did was she said, you know what? I'm going to start eating a lot more green foods. And so she started eating green foods. Meanwhile, she got her master's and then she got a PhD in the area of natural medicine. And then she realized water was pretty important to the human body. So she looked into her water and tested it and realized she was drinking a bunch of stuff that she shouldn't have been. And maybe there's a link, maybe not, but maybe there's a link to leukemia, maybe not. And so what she started doing is, filter's not the right word, but she started putting water in glass pitchers and letting the sun bake them. So it's sort of a purifier, a disinfectant. And so she said she's been drinking that water her whole life. If it's in the wintertime, she has some UV light that she would put under the water for a certain amount of time to disinfect her water.
Right.
And that's where today's podcast really came from. It's just, I'm so sorry. I can't think of names. I think it's whatever it is, whatever condition I have. It's because of the water I've been drinking. Hazel Parcells.
Hazel Parcells.
Yes, Dr. Parcells. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look at Dr. Parcells and her work. We started looking at it just recently, and water was the number one thing that I took from it. And so...
you bring up a really good distinction here, because almost what came to mind as you talked about the sun, these glass pitchers sitting in the sun, evaporation, is you get into a conversation about distilled water. And distilled water is not good for you to drink, because distilled water has only water, and it doesn't have any of the trace minerals and trace things that your body needs. But if you drink like a well-type water or an artesian water source, that has a perfect balance that's created by nature, by God, that has all of the trace things in it that are good for your body, that your body needs.
Thanks for bringing that point up. I have been told, and I am not a doctor, but if you take distilled water and put some pink salt in it, you can replace a lot of what the water actually has.
That's right. The Himalayan salt
salt.
Celtic salt is another great option.
Okay, Celtic salt's another option.
Yep. Celtic salt has 49 different minerals because it's sea salt from, arguably if it's Celtic, it's from the northern Atlantic Ocean that has been dried down to its salt form, and has 49 different minerals in it.
So then I was online and I saw another doctor say, take some Celtic salt, put it on your tongue, and let it dissolve, and then drink water. Yep. Because that does what?
It opens up the mucosa and opens up your cell pathways in your digestive tract to absorb the water. Because what happens when you put salt on something? Well, salt dehydrates it initially. So to balance it chemically, it needs water to balance that chemical reaction. So if you do a pinch of salt and then chase it with water, you're just prepping all those coming tissues that have been parched by the salt to absorb lots of water. So you won't have that sudden need to just go use the restroom. It won't just run through you. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's Hazel Parcells as well.
Is it really?
Yep, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, so you know about Dr. Parcells? I
know Dr. Parcells.
No kidding. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll have to have another conversation, maybe just about her work someday.
No, maybe we can get her on the podcast.
I think she's gone, isn't she?
We'll see.
Yeah. What, you got a channel or something?
We ran the Ouija board. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
my Catholic friends.
So what are our choices then? I know this is kind of a summary, but this is what we did, and you can add whatever you want because I'll probably miss something. But there's some water choices that we have. Mm-hmm. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, it's the tap water. If you want to drink out of your tap, go right ahead. But we're not going to do that. Our tap water, I think, has a certain smell that I don't like. And I suspect we could have got used to the taste. We were actually drinking tap water in 2009 when we moved here. And this is just not I'm not trying to give our small town a bad name at all, but it's just a general small town tap water. It's like...
Well, it's funny is Volga is from the Volga River in Russia. So anyway.
How do we get water all the way from Russia? See, I cannot figure that one out. So
collusion.
You could put a reverse osmosis in your home as well. And that does what to the water?
It just triple filters it.
So it takes all the bad stuff out, but it also takes a lot of the good stuff as well.
That's right. So you borderline on that realm of distilling it, not quite that extensive a process because distilling requires you to boil the water, whereas... this is just a triple filtration system. So then there you would want to add your Himalayan or your Celtic salt to your diet or to the foods you're eating to balance how the water is getting absorbed into your system.
All right, so we have the reverse osmosis, okay? And you can put that into your house, your whole house system, and that's what we have done. Another one is a countertop gravity filter that we use. We found this company called Berkey, and we'll get into not the lawsuit necessarily, but there's a little controversy with Berkey.
Britta's out there. Britta's got a charcoal filter system.
Yeah, Pure. My mom has Pure, and actually that tastes so good. It's my favorite water to drink, but I don't know what's in the Pure after she filtrates filters it either. So there's options to filter your water. And what we have done as well is, and I'll get to this, no pun intended with the word well there just a second ago, but we'll get into these 3 glasses. Actually, let's just do it now. Actually, I want to talk about the Berkey controversy first.
Okay.
I want to get into these 3 glasses. So I've been doing some research on Berkey. There is a controversy. I watched, I don't know, about 4 or 5 videos today. There is a lawsuit about what they're saying. Is it really taking out 99% of all these things or not? And
for how long?
And for how long?
That's the bigger question: is how long is it filtering at this high level?
Mm-hmm. So they would say that their filters could last up to, I think, 3 years, and then you need to replace them.
Yeah, a certain amount of gallons of water that it's supposed to be good for.
Yeah, the normal family. Ours is a little bit bigger than, we're not a 4-person family. We're 7 of us total. Yeah. Anyway,
8 if you count the dog.
So we wanted to get rid of fluoride. We just don't trust fluoride. I know there's a natural fluoride, but I've also heard from a water guy that I know very, very well, good dear friend of mine, that they are putting fluoride in the water because it's supposed to be good for your teeth. I don't know if it is or isn't. I'm a little interested in this. I know doing some research.
There's some very interesting research that's tied to COVID and fluoride, but that's a whole other conversation for another day.
Well, and I've done some reading that Hitler used fluoride as well. And so why did he use fluoride? Can you control people somehow using fluoride? I don't know. But why would he use fluoride in the concentration camps? That's something to think about and research. I don't know what the answer is. So we thought, you know what? I think we're just going to stay away from fluoride until we know.
If our listeners have some feedback, leave it in the comments below. Send us a message. I want to know.
Yes, if you think I should be and you have a study for me to read, I'll probably send it to Dennis and you can read it.
There you go. Oh, we'll follow up.
But there's a Berkey controversy because they have found elevated aluminum in their water after it's been purified through the Berkey system. Not just the 2 black filters, but they have round white ones for fluoride. And they use ammonium oxide as the binder to bind the fluoride. But the problem is aluminum is seeping into the water. So the aluminum levels are actually higher than the tap water after they go through the Berkey. Now, Berkey hasn't, from my knowledge, they haven't said anything, but they pulled all those filters off. You can't get them anymore. So they're probably looking at what's really going on. And so do you know anything about this as well?
Yeah, just same stuff that you've read, that, the filter is supposed to be functional at like 92% filtration for 1,500 gallons. Well, what they're finding is after the first 300 or 400 gallons, that filtration is down to 70%, maybe 50%. So either the water that is being filtered is way worse than people thought. So the Berkey is getting, the filter just isn't lasting as long because the water is that bad. Or you got to just go into the scientific method. You have to look at, maybe the product isn't made as well as they say. But my scientific brain says, are we comparing apples to apples when it comes to water testing? Because if you're putting fresh lake water into it versus municipal water to try to filter it down, I can see where one would use more of the filtration capacity than the other. So just stay tuned.
Now, there's a difference between Aberdeen water and Spearfish water. Mm-hmm. Spearfish, South Dakota. Yeah. My sister has water from Spearfish, pretty darn good, right? So anyway,
mountain water.
Yeah. So what are you putting in that? What is it actually purging from the water? Is really the question. So that's the controversy. I still feel pretty comfortable. If you need emergency water, I'd definitely go with the Berkey, but there's other options on the market as well. Mm-hmm. So check them all out. But what is in your water, ladies and gentlemen?
And how much water should a person have on hand for in case of an emergency?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Typically enough to supply your household for 3 to 5 days. Because if you have a filtration system, you can filter, you can let it sit in the sun, you can do a number of different things, you can boil it and recycle it. So you should have enough water to sustain you and your household. So the amount of water that a person should drink in a day is their body weight divided by 2. So if you weigh 200 pounds, divide that by 2 is 100. You should have 100 ounces of water a day. So for a household member, for 5 days, should have 500 ounces of water around. Well, if there's 32 ounces in a half gallon, 64 in a gallon, Now you know that you're close to just about 9 gallons of water for a 200-pound person for 5 days. Now take that times the number of household members you have with their varying weights. A household should have somewhere between probably 40 and 50 gallons of fresh water on supply or on stock if you would run into a major emergency.
How do you store it?
That's the trick, because PVC and plastic's not great, but if you can get, glass gallon jars, you can store it in that, much like the puree water. You can get other glass jars, masonry jars, and just store it in quarts or in, quart jars or bigger. But you just find a way to keep it on stock and on supply. You should, if you're preparing for, a long winter outage or a potential where the power would be out for days where you wouldn't have the value of the municipal water system for you.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. You need to store some water. Go down in Louisiana. They know a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially
after
in New
hurricane
Orleans.
season.
We have 3 glasses of water. And so if you're listening to this podcast, you can't see what we're doing here, but I'll just describe it. I've got glass 1, 2, and 3. And
if you're an optimist, you'd say the glass is half.
that's right. It's half full.
And if you're a pessimist, you'd say this glass is half.
Half empty. Right?
Yeah. And if you're an engineer, what would you say about this glass?
We could make that better somehow. I don't know. What would you
It's
say?
twice as big as it needs to be.
That's true.
All right. So we got glasses 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. I just want you to take a drink out of each one and tell me which one tastes better.
Okay.
Just tastes better.
Ooh, very chlorinated. I can smell the chlorine.
Glass number 1.
Yeah, very chlorinated.
Okay.
I feel like I'm wine tasting.
You look like you're wine tasting. This isn't water. This is vodka.
Okay, that's better. The first one's way too chlorinated.
How about that one? Chlorinated?
And no, it smells more earthy, actually. Yep, that is more of a well-type water, artesian. This is probably a household. Number 2 is probably a house. Okay, so from 1 to 3, my guess, 1 is standard tap water. 2 is some sort of filtered water with a puree, Berkey, something filtration system. And number 3 is an artesian well water type thing.
It's pretty close, isn't it? All right, so number 1 was from our tap.
Okay. It very chlorine. You can smell the chlorine in it.
Oh, yeah. You can smell it. It's bad. Did you like the taste?
I don't like the chlorine taste. I'm not a big fan.
Go swimming in that thing.
Yeah.
Number 2 is from the Berkey.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's Berkey water.
We did not talk about this beforehand. I like this. Okay.
So, and let me just, it's way different from this. I would never drink that again. So 3, what did I do to number 3? You get the first 2 right, basically. But what I did something different to 3. If you think about our podcast,
I'm guessing you just let it sit in the sun.
so I took Berkey water
Yep.
and I baked it in the sun for a day.
Yep.
And one of the things, what did you know? Do you notice the difference between these two?
Yeah.
What do you notice most?
Literally, the water number 3 tastes earthy. It tastes almost like there could be a microbe in it, like not algae, but something that just gives it more oomph or almost more pure than just a standalone Berkey.
So it's basically disinfected by the sun.
Cool.
And one of the things I noticed when I first drank this, the water baked in the sun, is it felt softer to my tongue. Did you notice that or not?
No, I didn't really notice that because I was more focused on the taste, not the feel.
Yeah. I want you to try it once. See if it feels softer or not. I know I'm predisposing him, but we trust Dennis. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I mean, I could see what you mean by softness. I mean, there isn't as much of a minerally taste to it. Like the Berkey still has kind of that minerally. There's still something residual in it, whereas this one's been exposed. And did you store it in the sun with the lid on or lid off?
Lid. Well, I didn't have a lid, but what I put in there is paper towel
Over the top.
over the top.
Okay, But still, you're allowing a lot of oxygenation to that water versus it just being straight through a Berkey system from the tap, filtered, and drinking. Where this has been exposed, it's been oxygenated. That would also change that profile a little bit because think of oxygen, what it does to iron. It rusts it. It binds to those heavy minerals and gives a little more oxygenation. Actually, when you're doing cancer treatment, one of the very popular things to do to change your chemical water profile is to add drops of hydrogen peroxide to your water to super oxygenate your water.
It's funny you bring that up. Let's have another podcast on this because I just saw a gentleman getting cancer treatment. 20%. I can't remember what percentage was hydrogen peroxide in his treatment.
Yep.
I can't remember what percentage it was, but it was lower. But I'm like,
hey, if you
that's how they're going to cure this guy.
Yeah, if you use hydrogen peroxide on your cuts on the outside, why wouldn't you use it to help cure your insides?
Okay, we need to talk about what is hydrogen peroxide and alternative ways to cure. Well, you got to be careful.
Yeah, I do.
You got to be careful of the.
I can talk about research. I can talk about things that are being done out there in the medical treatment. I just can't endorse one thing or the other.
So, ladies and gentlemen, treat yourself to a good glass of purified, sun-baked water.
Cheers.
You can have the Berkey. Thanks for the show.
Hey, thanks.
We got to do our thing.
You got to do a thing.
May God strengthen
the bars
of your gates. Cheers.